This is Promethean Action's weekly Saturday night class series. Tonight, we're beginning a two-part class, which will be tonight and then again June 15th. It would be interrupted for 1 week because we're having our conference on the 8th in southeastern Michigan. Tonight's class, in the context of tonight's class, briefly, the obscene judicial frame-up against President Trump on Thursday has stirred many Americans to action. Many of you know the flood of contributions to President Trump's contribution site was so intense Thursday and Friday that the site crashed. He got 38 million in contributions on Thursday alone when this obscene jury verdict was announced. And over the 24-hour period, 55 million. I think a third of them were people who have never contributed to that campaign at all before. It was their first contribution. And I know for many of them, it was their first contribution ever to a political campaign. So this indication of what this country is becoming under the people who control the senile Joe Biden has stirred millions of Americans to action, and that's still going on. At the same time, it's stirring them to thought about how to understand more fully the impulse which unites us and President Trump and so many millions of patriotic Americans, to understand the science of where we stand, what we're putting ourselves on the line for. So no more appropriate thing at this point than Will Wertz to speak about Cardinal Nicolaus of Cusa. As we said in the invitation for this meeting, Will was was a close co-worker personally with Lyndon LaRouche for decades. He was framed up judicially with Lyndon LaRouche and sent to jail unjustly with LaRouche in 1989, and spent his years in jail translating many of the works of Nicolaus of Cusa, which he published in a book. So he's eminently qualified to this subject, and the subject itself is one which has special meaning at this moment in American history and world history. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Will Wertz.
Okay, thank you, Tony. And I want to extend my thanks to Promethean Action for giving me this opportunity to speak about Nicolaus of Cusa. I'm not sure how many of your audience are familiar with him. He was born in 1401 and passed away 1464. During that time, he became a cardinal in the Catholic Church and participated in a council in Basel, Switzerland, around 1433, where he introduced a book that he wrote called On Catholic Concordance, which I'll come back to. He later left that council and went to Greece, where he met with representatives of the Greek and Russian Orthodox Church and persuaded them to come back to Italy for a council that took place in Florence in 1438-39. And one of the things he did in coming back from Greece was to bring the works of Plato back to Italy, where they could be translated and be made available in Western Europe. at that time. Only one work of Plato had been available through the centuries in Western Europe, and that was the Timaeus. But all the other works had not been available. So Aristotle became the dominant figure in culture in Western Europe. And that bringing the works of Plato back to Italy for translation was one of the major factors in the development of the Golden Renaissance. And Cusa later, as I said, became a cardinal, and at one point he was the general vicar of the Roman Catholic Church, which means that he was the person responsible in the absence of the Pope for the administration of the Vatican. And in the 1460s, he undertook an effort to reform the Catholic Church, which, if it had been successful, probably would have resulted in there not having been a Reformation, and then a Counter-Reformation after that, dividing the religion in Western Europe between Protestants and Catholics. But the Curia was so corrupt that he was laughed out. They basically just laughed at him, and he was unsuccessful in bringing about that reform. Could you show the picture I have of Nicolaus of Cusa's tomb?
You bet.
He was the titular bishop of a church in Rome called St. Peter in Chains. And because of his efforts, he was, as you can see in this bas relief, he was viewed as an individual who played a key role in liberating the Catholic Church from the problems which had beset it over an extended period of time. Now, and I'll just go through a few other graphics very quickly before commencing with my remarks about the importance of Cusa. Could you show the photo of the book of translations on Nicolaus of Cusa? This is the book that was published back in, I think, 1994 toward a new Council of Florence. Because what you have to realize is that there was a split between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church in the year 1054. And the Council of Florence succeeded in temporarily reuniting the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. It was not long lasting, but it was a very significant effort. And this is the book that which contains the various translations which I did while in prison. There are some works which I did not translate because there were already available translations. But for instance, very important work is On Learned Ignorance by Nicolaus of Cusa, which he wrote in 1439 at the time of the Council of Florence. That one in particular, I would recommend to people. Then could you just show the this is a book that I wrote recently, Beware the British East India Company, towards an alliance between the USA, Russia, China, and India to finally defeat the British Empire. The first two chapters of this book address the importance of Nicolaus of Cusa in two respects. The first chapter in respect to the development of the concept of national sovereignty, and the second chapter deals with the development of the American system of political economy of Alexander Hamilton, of Friedrich List, Henry C. Carey, an advisor to Abraham Lincoln. The American system, which, for instance, back in, I think it was 2016, President Trump at that time addressed very directly, more directly than probably any U.S. president in my memory, where he called for a revival of the American model of political economy. And this is what Nicolaus of Cusa contributed to this with the ideas that he developed back in the 14th century. And what I'm going to be addressing tonight are a few critical issues. First, that Nicolaus of Cusa was really the first person to develop the concept of government by the consent of the governed, which obviously is a fundamental principle of the American system. It's certainly expressed in the Declaration of Independence. And I know of no other writer who put forward that concept before Nicolaus of Cusa did in his book on Catholic Concordance back in 1433. So that's a long time before the American Revolution. The second concept is the related to that is the concept of national sovereignty. Nation states did not exist. Sovereign nation states did not exist anywhere in the world until after Nicolaus of Cusa put forward a concept of that in that same book in 1433. And the first nation states, sovereign nation states, were in France under Louis XI, and in England under I think it was Henry II, shortly thereafter. But they did not last very long in terms of the concept, because the concept of the sovereign nation state never became the hegemonic conception all around the world, and therefore it was suppressed by the Venetian imperial system, which we are facing today in the form of what became the Anglo-Dutch imperial system, of the which was initiated with the British and Dutch East India companies back in the really the 1600s, but consolidated in 1763 at the Treaty of Paris prior to the American Revolution. And in a very fundamental way, the fundamental conflict in the world today is actually between the American system, which is based on Cusa's notions of consent of the government by the consent of the government, and the notion of a sovereign nation state, as opposed to a supranational form of government. This is this conflict between America and the efforts of what we often call globalists, but it's actually the Anglo-Dutch imperial system. That's the fundamental conflict in the world. No other conflict is fundamental. The idea that there's a conflict between the United States and Russia, or United States and China, that's fundamental, is absolutely wrong. That's basically a diversion on the part of the Anglo-Dutch system, which unfortunately has taken over the United States to a large degree, even though they are our historical enemy, since the death of Roosevelt. And that's what we're really dealing with in the world today, this conflict. And so it's very important to get a sense of where the idea of national sovereignty, where the idea of government by the consent of the governed comes from. And this, as I said, these ideas were expressed by Nicolaus of Cusa in his book on Catholic Concordance in 1433. And then they gained a tremendous impetus with the Council of Florence in 1438-39. And you had the establishment of the first sovereign nation states in Europe, and shortly thereafter. In France, is a large part due to the efforts of Joan of Arc. And I saw somewhere where the day that President Trump was convicted was actually the patron saint day of Joan of Arc. Yeah. But her effort against the British again were absolutely critical in developing the nation state. What I will also just develop is the concept of man as in the living image of the Creator, as having the capacity for creative reason and love, which is the central concept which came out of the Council of Florence, and which is fundamental to the idea of productive labor, which is central to the American system of political economy, as expressed by Alexander Hamilton. Another American system economist, Friedrich List, actually developed the concept of mental capital of the mind, that what you're investing in developing a society, according to the American system of economy, is the mind, developing the productive powers of the human mind. And a society develops by the increases in the productive powers of the human mind within the society as a whole. That is a growing economy with no limits to growth. And that's fundamental to the American system of political economy. And this is related to an idea which Lyndon LaRouche developed called potential relative population density. His basic idea is that what you're not only must population grow, but even more fundamentally, the productive powers of the population must be increasing relative to the land area and the density of population. So this idea actually develops, or is foreshadowed by Nicolaus of Cusa and his concept of that the Creator is actually potential itself, and that man is the mind of man is in the image of the potential itself. So there's no limits to growth. All there is potential. The potential to make, the potential to become, and the potential to have become. That's the idea developed by Nicolaus of Cusa. Now let me just go to the idea of national sovereignty as he puts it forward. But to begin, let me just mention something from Lyndon LaRouche in The Christian of Science Economy. What he wrote there is, the essence of good modern statecraft is the fostering of societies, such as sovereign nation-state republics, the which in turn ensure the increase of the potential population densities per capita of present and future generations of mankind as a whole, and which societies promote this result by the included indispensable, inseparable means of emphasis upon promoting the development and truthful self-expression of the divine spark, which is the sovereign individual's power of creative reason. Now, let me just jump forward to how Nicolaus of Cusa developed the idea of national sovereignty. At that time, what we would call a supranational government or globalist government took the form of what was called a supramontane conception of the Catholic Church in Europe. The idea that was put forward was that the Pope had received the donation from Constantine, it was the Pope who would appoint and depose rulers, whether that was the emperor or a king of a kingdom. And what Nicolaus of Cusa did is he went through the documents of the time in which this donation was alleged to have taken place, and he determined that no such donation actually occurred. This is extraordinarily important because you had to debunk this idea of the donation of Constantine and of a supramontane, that is over the mountains, over the Alps, concept of the power of the papacy in order to be able to develop the nation state, the idea of a sovereign nation state. So what Nicolaus of Cusa wrote is as follows: I've investigated this matter as far as I could assuming that there was no doubt that Constantine had the power to make such a donation, although this question has not yet been resolved and probably never will be. I have viewed the acts of the Holy Councils which took place after Nicaea, and I find no confirmation of what is said about that donation. It is clear that Constantine did not give the Pope the rule over Ravenna, the city of Rome, and the West. So this is coming from a cardinal in the Catholic Church, and he's basically saying the Pope does not have that authority, and that clears the way for national sovereignty. He further looked into the Council of Nicaea, and he concluded the following. The electors do not depend on the Roman pontiff. They are not created by him, nor do they have their power from him, but from the common consent of all those subject to the empire, who have the power to establish an emperor over themselves, not from positive law, but from divine and human law. It is right and just that the empire should derive its power from election by them without papal confirmation. He goes on, the electors derive their basic authority from the common consent of all those who could, by natural law, have created the emperor, and not from the Roman pontiff, who has no authority to give any region in the world a king or emperor without its consent. Now, he also then makes the point that all decisions should be made at a local level, not on a supranational level. He says, whatever arises within the province should be heard and finally decided by fellow members of the province. For every law ought to be appropriate to the country or place and time. Further, all cases should be settled in the place where they arose. And he argues that issues should be brought to the universal national councils of France, Spain, and Germany. And these councils should be established out of zeal for the preservation of the Commonwealth and the furtherance of national peace and mutual love. All matters ought to be settled in the areas in which they had arisen. So he's operating within the confines of a Holy Roman Empire, which still existed in Europe. But what he's done is debunk the idea of the authority of the Pope to determine who is king or who the government is. And he's saying that it must arise from the common consent. And I'll quote to you further where he says the consent of the subjects. And all decisions must be made on a local basis, not at some supranational level. And in respect to this idea of government by the consent of the governed, what he says is as follows. All legislation is based on natural law, and any law which contradicts it cannot be valid. Hence, since natural law is naturally based on reason, all law is rooted by nature in the reason of man. For since all are by nature free, every governance can only come from the agreement of and consent of the subjects. And there's the concept, which is fundamental to our own Declaration of Independence and fundamental to creating, for instance, a world not ruled by divide and conquer tactics of the Anglo-Dutch system of globalism, but a world in which you can have sovereign nation states working together in a community of principle based upon their mutual benefit. And this is based on the concept that man is free, just as the creator is free. And so there should not be law by coercion or government by coercion. It has to be by the common consent of the subjects or of the citizens in our case. And he says, it is the common opinion of all the experts on the subject that the Roman people can take the power to make laws away from the emperor because he derives his power from the people. That's a direct quote from On Catholic Concordance. When they order something contrary to divine commandment, it is evident that the command does not share in the divine rulership, and so one should not obey it. No one is obliged to observe an unjust law, and no living person is exempt from a just one. Now, all of this comes, these concepts come from the notion that man is created in the living image of the Creator. And by that, what Nicolaus of Cusa is developing is the concept that the human being is fundamentally characterized by the capacity for creativity, just as in the image of the Creator, and also love. Remember, it said in the New Testament that God is love, and so this is the concept that Nicolaus of Cusa operates on. And if you believe that, if you establish that the actual nature of man is to be creative and to further develop the physical universe in the benefit of man, and also to develop institutions which can promote the creativity of the individual human being, of all human beings, then you have a new concept which unleashes the power of the human mind to transform the physical universe for the benefit of all men, which is the expression of love. Now, what Nicolaus of Cusa writes in a book which he wrote also in the period of 1439-40, along with On Learned Ignorance, is a book called On Conjectures. And what he writes there is, man is indeed God, but not absolutely. Since that is because he's in the image of the Creator. He's a human God. That's what he actually said. He is therefore a human God. Man is also the world, but not everything contractedly, since he is man. Man is therefore a microcosm of the human world. The region of humanity therefore embraces God and the whole world in its human potentiality. So the man is a microcosm responsible for further developing the macrocosm. And in another book called On Barillas, he says, just as God is the creator of real entities and of natural forms, man is the creator of rational entities and artificial forms. Lyndon LaRouche developed a concept of inventive ideas or hypotheses as thought objects. And this idea of Nicolaus of Cusa, the man is a creator of rational entities, just as the creator God is the creator of real entities, is that same idea. These thought objects or rational entities have to the extent to which they cohere with the actual nature of the universe, have the power to transform the universe for the further development of human beings. Now, and I'll just give you a further indication of it. He says in another work called The Game of Spheres that the power of the soul is to reason, and therefore the power to reason is the soul. For this reason, the soul is the inventive power of the arts and of new sciences. So when you realize that humanity was, prior to the Council of Florence and prior to these works of Nicolaus of Cusa, was reduced to a condition of serfdom, a virtual cattle-like slavery in most of Europe and in most of the world, you see that these ideas, these thought objects that Nicolaus of Cusa develops, represent the power, a power that allows man as a microcosm to further develop the macrocosm. And there are no limits to growth. Nicolaus of Cusa is completely opposed to the false idea of entropy, that everything winds down. Instead, the universe is anti-entropic. Could you just show that document, Tony, of the population chart?
Yep. I'm going to go forward.
All right. So just briefly, this is just of Europe, but it shows the increase in population, and also there are accompanying charts, which I don't have here, show increase in population density, life expectancy at birth, and so forth. And as you can see, this is the period. Let's see. Right here is the period of the Dark Age in Europe, and then this is the period after the Council of Florence, where begins to be an increase, and then then you have an exponential increase in the population density that takes place up to 1975. So the point being, it is this calling forth of the creative power of the human mind that is critical to this exponential increase in population density, in this case in Europe, but actually globally. And this increase is greater than the cumulative increase throughout all earlier periods in human history. Now, the concept that the theological concept that was behind this is something called the filioque in Latin. In the Nicene Creed, it said that I believe in God the Father, and the Son, and you have the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit proceeds both from the Father and the Son, and filioque means and the Son. And the basic idea here is that the individual man, by imitating the Son, Christ, is who is the logos or intellectual reason, because as in St. John, the Apostle St. John, it said that that the Logos was with God in the beginning, and all things are created through the Logos, and the Logos became flesh. So the basic idea here is that man is capable of participating in the Logos, creative reason, and also acting on the basis of love to bring about miracles, which clearly mankind has done throughout history, but especially with greater intensity in this period from the Dark Ages, then the Council of Florence, and then all the way into the present period. Now, of course, this can be halted if the globalists and those who argue, in fact, in behalf of no limits, in fact, argue on behalf of the idea that there are limits to growth, that we can't industrialize anymore. The people who advocate climate control falsely. I mean, Cusa's idea is man is a microcosm who must develop the macrocosm, and the macrocosm, the universe, is the potential to become. It is entropic. It's there to be developed. But the extreme environmentalists argue just the opposite. And if they were successful, what you'd have is a complete decline of that exponential increase in population. They want to reduce the world's population. There are people who actually advocate reducing the world's population to 1 billion people today. So that's still the fight that has existed throughout history, and the fight between and especially since the Council of Florence, between the nation-state republic and the globalists or the supranational interests. Now, my time is coming. I want to just spend about 40 minutes or so that's coming up very quickly. And I just wanted to just one further thing that I wanted to emphasize, which is this, again, this question of the nature of the human being. Now, of course, Aristotle believed that the human being was only capable of sense perception and logical deduction. and he denied the existence of creativity. The American poet Edgar Allan Poe made the point that any oligarchy can control a population if the oligarchy can convince you that there are only two pathways to truth, which is sense perception or logical deduction. But what he said is the actual human nature is to hypothesize, as the great astronomer Kepler did, to hypothesize or to develop thought objects or to conjecture, as Cusa developed that idea. That is the nature of man. And all oligarchical societies want to deny human creativity because it challenges their political power. And they want you to believe that all you can do is sense things and then come to logical deductions, and not create anything new. And so this is really the fundamental issue that's before humanity at this moment in world history. It's not the first time that that's been the issue, but it is definitely the issue right now, because that's what we're up against. And that there's a denial of the actual nature of man as creative and that's capable of love. And Nicolaus of Cusa, just from that standpoint, he wrote a book called On the Peace of Faith. This is after the Turks had taken over Constantinople in the year 1453. He wrote this book on the Peace of Faith. And the point that he makes in that book is that it is possible, it is both possible and necessary for people of diverse religions, people from different areas of the world, different cultures, to live together, because we're all created in the living image of the Creator, therefore capable of creative reason and love. So there can be unity of humanity in diversity. You can have, as Lyndon LaRouche emphasized, a community of principle among the family of sovereign nation states, in which each nation state is responsible for developing its own citizens, but each nation state can work with other nation states to develop all of humanity. And this idea of the peace of faith later led to the Treaty of Westphalia, which resolved the 30 Years' War in Western Europe. It's also the basis of Franklin Roosevelt's good neighbor policy. It is also the basis of the Monroe Doctrine, as opposed to the Theodore Roosevelt corollary, which was imperialistic. But the Monroe Doctrine was this notion of creating a community of principle among a family of sovereign interests, sovereign nation states, as opposed to any imperialistic system. So I think what I'll do is just end with that, and perhaps other material can be brought up through questions. What I intend to do is to develop more of Nicolaus of Cusa's scientific contribution in the second class. Although I may have sort of foreshadowed some of that in the discussion this evening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was tremendously people should raise their hands for questions and discussion, but I think that was tremendously powerful, because, I mean, this is the Renaissance world outlook, which is not only, what patriotic Americans fundamentally believe, but, it rings to everybody in the world who, regardless of even what they think about America, they want such a policy to exist in the world. And, it just gives a picture of the entire world pushing forward for the end of this oligarchical empire, of the extended undead British Empire. It just brings to mind that, that President Trump, to me, it brings to mind that President Trump is the best known figure in the entire world among living people and the most popular around the entire world, regardless of, national policies and national various national policies regarding the U.S. And that's and the reason is what you're saying. I mean, that's what I think. But anyway, you can either respond or not. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of his first term in office, President Trump made a number of speeches around the country in which he referred to the American model of political economy. He may not have been able, because of opposition, to fully carry that out, but he referenced Lincoln. He referenced McKinley. In particular, among others, in this respect. The idea of protective tariffs is traditional American system political economy. Alexander Hamilton advocated that. Friedrich List, who wrote a book called On National Economy, discussed that at length, that this is crucial, that you have to have protective tariffs in order to protect your domestic industry and manufacturing capabilities, so that you can develop your economy, and that other countries don't dump cheap products on your shores, which you are unable to match. So those policies are very, very much American system policies. President Trump was also very explicit in saying that he thought it was a good thing to work together with Russia, a good thing to work together with China, even if there are disagreements, such as the need to impose protective tariffs, to try to mitigate the damage done by globalization, but through outsourcing to China and other countries. Of course, there's a broader solution to all of these, which would involve collaboration between U.S., Russia, China, India in particular, to create a new Bretton Woods system that would reverse this globalization that is taken over all over the world. And of course, the American system also includes national banking as opposed to the Federal Reserve. So I know Promethean Action calls for dismantling the Federal Reserve and replacing it with some sort of national banking. All of those would be very important. And President Trump obviously is the one person who's really fighting all these policies, including fighting climate control, since he took the U.S. out of the Paris climate control agreement. So I think, these are some of the reasons why he's been gone after in the way that he has. Lyndon LaRouche was gone after for the same kind of reason. And I might point out he was indicted when he was running for president during the middle of the campaign, actually towards the end of the campaign. So there are certain similarities there in terms of an unjust legal system being used to try to destroy political opponents who are in favor of national sovereignty, in favor of developing the productive power of our economy, and in favor of world peace.
So I'd encourage people to raise their hands and get in the discussion. But I mean, there's another aspect. Oh, the people have. I didn't see it. Okay, great.